how did you experience Russian disinformation? When, like, how do you see it?
Thank you for inviting me. So, first of all, I'm really very thankful to Norway and Norwegian friends for standing with Ukraine. And I do believe that your support is not just to stabilize the front line or to help us to keep fighting, but actually I do believe that Norway with Viking spirit is with us until we defeat Russian imperialism. Why I would like to focus on Russian imperialism? Because Russian disinformation, Russian propaganda started many centuries ago. It's not just about 2014, because let's remind me, actually, please raise the hands who visited Kiev St. Sophia Cathedral. So it seems like there are lots of Ukrainian friends who visited St. Sophia Cathedral, but why I mentioned this? Because St. Sophia Cathedral was built at the beginning of 11th century when Moscow didn't exist. And who knows when Peter I, I would not say Peter the Great, renamed Muscovy, stealing the name of Rus, which is Kievan Rus. We have these connections, Ukrainians, almost 1,000 years ago, with Norway, and there is some royal connections. When Peter I renamed Muscovy, it was in 1721. So actually, this was the way how Muscovy at that time wanted to legitimize their history from Rus, also grabbing St. Sophia Cathedral and other cultural heritage, and telling the world that Kievan Rus, it's a part of Russia, Russian history. So this is why I'm telling this history, because it matters. I do remember from Russian invasion into Crimea, advocating for tougher sanctions. I heard many times, Ukraine is an artificial failed state. Ukrainians are Nazis fighting not for values which are European values. So there were a lot of manipulations from Russian side which already became like narratives in European or even United States societies. So this is why it's really important to explain that Ukraine, now when we are moving closer towards the EU and NATO membership, and when I used to chair the Foreign Relations Committee in the Ukrainian Parliament, we incorporated into Ukrainian constitution the strategic goal of foreign policy of Ukraine to become a full-fledged member of EU and NATO. So actually we Ukrainians, we belong to European civilization, and we are Europeans by our DNA, by our civilizational passport. And it's also important to explain because I remember when Russia started its war from attempted illegal annexation of Crimea, many foreigners were telling that this is the kind of conflict within Ukraine. It's not international aggression, Russian aggression against Ukraine. It is just Russian-speaking people fighting with Ukrainians because their languages are not protected. This is also why it's important, because here in this region, in Baltic states, Russia might also use the issue of violation of Russian-speaking population. Sending green mans or not green mans, now it's could be the swarm of drones. Their languages are not protected. This is also why it's important. Multi-crisis scenario from blocking the Suwalki corridor or attacking Hotland or many other because here in creating. And actually for this year, even Americans finally changed their messages and telling that we should prepare for Russian forces testing NATO Article 5 by some of provocation which might happen even this year. But previously they were telling that Russians don't have enough capacity to start another war. So when democracies are preparing for peaceful negotiation, settlement, or ceasefire, because I still hear a lot of messages, Hanna, your armed forces created a window of opportunity with this Crimean isolation campaign. They also, with these deep strikes, the best sanctions in the world when we are attacking Russian military factories, also oil refineries. So maybe it's a time to sit and negotiate with Russia. So this is the biggest mistake, because I do remember when Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014, there was this naive belief that through peaceful settlement, through the Minsk I, Minsk II, we're gonna reach ceasefire. But believe me, we've never seen a long-lasting ceasefire within 13 years of ongoing Russian aggression, which became a genocidal war against Ukrainians and the war in Europe. So my message here, because it's not just about propaganda, disinformation, thousands of trolls in social media. It's also the usage of AI, fake news. So when it's a cognitive aspect of modern warfare, when first battlefield is our consciousness, it's our belief, when they try to shake your opinion about your country, your government, NATO, and also Ukraine. When a lot of articles about Ukraine, corruption, and others asking, do you Norwegians need to pay more to help Ukraine? Like questioning either Ukrainians deserve or not. It's also a part of Russian hybrid warfare here, because with Trump and with America as not a reliable partner, Europe needs Europe, not just EU, but also Norway, UK. European civilization needs strong Ukraine, and this is the message. So European security architecture with Ukraine has better chances to counter the axis of evil, because in 2014, when you ask a question, so it was Russia alone fighting against Ukraine, sending first green mans, then tanks, and now this is the Russian drones in Sweden, in Lithuania, in Poland, in Romania. So it's also North Korean ballistic missiles, not just North Korean troops, which helped Russians in Kursk operation. And now North Korea is seriously considering about the rocket subdivision in Voronezh Oblast. So when a so-called axis of tyrannies preparing for defeat of European civilization, I think it's also a way when Russian kind of creating this environment. Let's talk about how to end the war through peaceful settlement. It's a continuation of war by the means of diplomacy by Russia, which is really important to understand. So my final comments. So here that Ukraine experienced that Russia used disinformation inside Ukraine to divide society. They used churches, especially Moscow Orthodox churches, to extend their network of agents to destabilize Ukraine, especially eastern part of Ukraine. Also in political sphere, Russia invested heavily in the fifth column, the big network of members of parliament also who were received who people supported these guys who are actually serving the interest of our enemies. So you have to be also very careful with this ultra rights and other forces. They are growing in Europe, and in Ukraine we've seen how they entered to the parliament much earlier than 2014, and they were against Ukraine's European integration and many others. So we are now sharing this experience of countering Russian disinformation propaganda also with countries like Taiwan, because in the Indo-Pacific region, Ukraine, strategic recommendations of modern warfare, unfortunately we became a laboratory of modern warfare, which includes also disinformation, propaganda, cognitive aspect. But I think here you have to work with your society, bring more expertise from Ukraine, because our knowledge, it's a way for you to safeguard, to prevent a real kinetic war, not allowing Russians to to destabilize your society from within.
Thank you so much. Paul, you're a researcher at the defense at FFI. What are like when they use disinformation as a tool? What do a state want to achieve by using disinformation?
This has kind of been a long discussion in the field of disinformation research. Like, what is the goal of a disinformation campaign? And obviously, each campaign has a different goal. But what's the overarching structure? And the discussion has been between, are we trying to, or are our enemies trying to make something very specific happen? Or are they trying to sow a little chaos, make it very difficult for productive things to happen, make a mess of things? And I think while there are examples, Romania is an example where an election was overturned because of very targeted disinformation and influence campaigns. But overarchingly, I think we're landing on that the goal is to kind of make things difficult. Sow distrust where you can sow distrust. And the reason for that is relatively simple, even though it's technical, because it's very, very difficult to say that these 3 lines of text are going to make this happen down the line of cause and effect. Whereas it's much easier to break something than it is to construct something. So I think that's kind of mainly the aim of these kinds of campaigns, is to break down kind of the glue between people, the glue between the people and institutions, break down their common story.
And from your perspective, how successful has Russia and other states been on conducting this in Europe?
Very difficult to say. It's a big question as well in my field. Like, how do you measure the effect of these things? And you have a bunch of people saying, why the hell are you researching disinformation? Like, it has changed nothing. To them, I would say there's about a $3 trillion industry. It's called advertising. That's about influencing people's behavior through information. So I can save a lot of people quite a lot of money if my opponents are correct. The point is, I think we can look across all of these major metrics in Europe, in the West, almost globally, and we can see trust is declining. The amount of democracies, free democracies in the world, is declining. The rate of mental health issues, especially in young people, but generally as well, is on the rise. Populism is on the rise. And I'm not saying Russia is, doing all of this, but they are certainly using quite well this new information system that started in the 1990s. It's called the internet. And everything that followed it, like social media and now like AI, using these tools, which is exacerbating the problem that these tools already infuse us with, which is a breakdown of common stories and the commonality between people.
Last question: can you see like traces of like systematic disinformation in Norway? Or is it just happening in other places?
No, we at FFI we do we have done for the past 4 or 5 elections. We've looked to see if our elections have been targets of Russian or Chinese disinformation, and I'll say right up front, we haven't found very much. But what we do find is that Russia really, they jump on when something pops up. It's an opportunistic kind of thing. So, for example, for about 3 years ago, there were some reindeer in the north of Norway that took a little field trip across the border and then came back. And the law in Norway from the Veterinary Institute, because of transmittable diseases and everything, says that these reindeer have to be put down. And a fine is to be levied, to helping increase the border security for grazing animals. Russia refused to pay the fine, and not only that, but then Maria Zakharova, who is the spokesperson for the Russian Foreign Ministry, sent out quite a long post saying that, Norway, pretending to be, animal welfare haven, green, caring about, indigenous people, we just go around and kill reindeer and don't care about these people at all. And I think that's kind of emblematic of the way that Russia, sometimes if something happens they will use it in Norway. It doesn't go anywhere. But just to leave us with a few points as well, in the past, when we were looking for Russian disinformation in Norway, we would look for the dropped article, right? Grammar. Poor Norwegian grammar in a tweet would be like, maybe this could be something, and then you'd analyze the context and everything. That's over. We're seeing so much more content coming from known Russian disinformation actors in perfect Norwegian. And that's not because some professor has gone over and taught them, Norwegian grammar. It's obviously got to do with AI. And we see the same thing with China. So these tools are becoming very much cheaper and very much easier to use. And so I think we can expect that, we haven't heard the last from Ivan and Sergei in St. Petersburg.
Randi, you're members of all the major medias in Norway, and you also have been, I know you have a big engagement for Ukraine, but how important is the media in this fight for information, a fight for the truth, and how are the media working on against disinformation?
Yes, first of all, I would say that in a world where we have so much insecurity, so much unsafety, we see that editorial media is more important than ever. In Norway, we're very lucky. We have a broad local media, regional media. We have strong national media, and we also have codes of conduct. Actually, we have one code of conduct in Norway, and that's very special that also the broadcaster is a part of it. I think that the most important word to say is trust. As you said, trust is very difficult to gain. It's very difficult, easy to lose, and you have to build it all the time. And on the one hand, there's always been mistakes in the media. I think that's media is not perfect. It's kladdeboken for historien. It's the notebook for history, but those loose notes. So media will always do something wrong. I think that's important. We're never perfect. But I think that one of the most important thing one have to do now is to be more transparent with the audience. What sources are we using? We need to fact check even more, and we need also, especially when it comes to pictures from the world, to verify. And what I would wish was that all, of course, media houses had a verification system, because what you see when trust is at stake is that if things are too good to be true, you think that they're fake. So I think that is in Norway we are very lucky. We have strong media, and I think we also are running quite much now with having resilience against disinformation. And we had a very small survey amongst our members, and actually one of the blind spots we have is inside threats. We don't talk much about that in Norway, but to have people hired that you haven't fact-checked well enough, that is one of the threats where we need to work on. Academia had some examples in the northern part of Norway on this. The second one is that we need to be better in investigative journalism. I don't know, do you remember the case where the Russians were buying cabins up in the north, in Finnmark, TV2? I think we need to do more about that. And then we have this fact-checking organization called Faktisk. The second thing that we're doing, we're actually doing with the whole society, because we are creating a foundation or a stiftelse called Tenk, together with the Publishers Association, with youth organizations, and also with the academia to work with the population. And we need to work not only with the young people to teach them what they can trust and not trust. 60 plus is the group that is in danger of being the one who is most open to disinformation and are not so trained in fact checking.
So, one question is like the media is also like for those who are working on disinformation, media is also like a targeting. It's not only politicians but also like how to discredit reliable media. Yeah. So how do you members prepare for like a situation where they will like be targeted either as media but also as journalists?
No, the most important thing you can do is to train and to be sure that you have to verify your sources. And in a global world where things are going really, really fast, whom can you trust? And I think that's really a problem. In Ukraine, I think we have very many good sources. We also have important to have people on the spot like we have. But if you take Gaza, for instance, it's so difficult because we don't know whom to trust, and it's very difficult to verify information. So it's training, and then it's fact-checking. We had this, I don't know if you had this podcast, who was trolling the inland. Have you heard that?
Yeah. That's very good.
That's an example of more journalism that we need to do to make sure that teach people how they can be cheated and what is necessary of skills to have.
Bjørn, you have been following the media, and it's like independent media critic since 2014. So everybody who follow you on social media knows that very well. So how do you see that disinformation, or maybe not like Russia have been able to spread the narratives in Norway? It's more like systematic disinformation. But how successful have they been to spread the narratives in Norway?
How many hours do I have?
You have 3 minutes and 50 seconds.
Okay, I'll try to be a little quicker then. No, first of all, I would like to say before I say something more that I was in a conference in Poland last year, and there, because I know that the political situation in Poland, also when it regards media, is very much different from Norway, much more polarized. So there, in a way, I had to, in a way, calm down the situation in Norway, because it's actually quite good. That's important to say in the beginning. That said, it has been, if you should divide the period from before and after 2022, I can see that there have been some differences. And you, for example, was mentioning Kyiv Rus, for example, and typically also would see during several decades until 2022, like, for example, it was described as a kind of there were Russian tsars in Kyiv Rus and things like that. It was not done deliberately, because just people were, scientists and others were influenced by maybe have been studying in Moscow, studying Russian, and then adopting the Russian narrative in a way. So that's typically one example. But if I should say more like when it comes to after 2014, I think, and that's also an international false narrative, that it was kind of a blurred kind of picture what was Russia actually doing in Donbass in 2014. And this narrative, was it Russian-backed separatists? You can't be a separatist in Ukraine if you come from Russia. You had to be, you can only be a separatist in your own country. So this has been an international kind of, phenomenon that it has been blurred. And actually just today, Aftenposten, one of the largest newspapers in Norway, they were describing the war in Donbass since 2014, only that Russia were involved. But if you read some, you will know that it was Russia who controlled the war, actually. And this is a very important narrative to understand what was going on in Ukraine from 2022 regarding many issues, also included the Minsk agreement and the issues about language and things like that, which then Russia tried to, in a way, explore and abuse this blurred picture. So there I think that media, in a way, have could have done a better job, to say it that way. Next, I would like to say, when it comes to typically Norwegian narrative, that's regarding Second World War and the so-called liberation of eastern part of northern Norway in Finnmark. where Russia also have been quite successful to present Russia as a kind of a liberator, but it actually was also Ukrainian soldiers during the Second World War in the Red Army that was liberating northern Norway. So that has been quite successful. I could say more, but I won't say. I don't have time more. And after 2022, there are different kind of narratives. You will see typically like spinning around peace, for example, negotiations, that's kind of stuff. It's hard to in a way go into now because we don't have time to it, but it's typical kind of narratives where Russia will point something out some success, and partly, and it depends also which kind of segments in society, I guess. And you had also a kind of an op-ed yesterday in Aftenposten from Kari Aga Myklebust and Karin Anna Egen, which is very good researchers on the Russian propaganda, amongst others, and how, for example, particularly there were some recently 2 organizations in Norway that were so-called unwanted or unwished organization in Russia, and then also a kind of way that they try to point on something and try to hurt our society and the open free society, how we should discuss with the kind of threats. And the last thing I would say that when it comes to fighting in a way Russian propaganda, it's very fragmented in Norway. We don't have any institutions that really work on it on a more long-term strategic level. Like, for example, we have one here, Lisa Mobrand, which is, you can translate it for me, but she's from something called a Swedish institution called Myndigheten for psykologisk forsvar, which I don't really know is it in English. What is it, Lisa? Yeah, so there they have like 80, 90 employees, if I'm not correctly wrong, which are then working on a strategic level on how to combat not only from Russia, but foreign warfare against Sweden, for example. And I think we have to work long-term on this. And I would say the last thing is that trust in Norway is very high, generally speaking, to authorities, to media and things, but we don't have a special DNA in Norway that it should last. And I think it's important to work with these issues before eventually the snowball should start to roll. And I think especially for younger people, where we have social media they're influenced by. So on long term, it's an issue that I think the society should take more seriously. Thank you.
Paul?
Yeah, I kind of want to go philosophical for a moment on trust, because we're all talking about trust in some way. And what is trust, right? Trust is not what you get by having all the facts lined up. You don't get trust from faktis.no. You don't get trust from the perfect media article. You get trust when you lack information, but you still believe, you feel that the source probably has good information. It's about a lack of facts, not the fulfillment of facts. And this kind of gets at a shift that we've seen in, targeted propaganda, targeted disinformation, relatively recently. So I was at a conference in DC earlier this year, and a wonderfully talented Ukrainian, Ksenia Ilyuk, presented these AI-generated videos that her company had found of young Ukrainian soldiers crying in their vehicles close to the front. There is no factual kind of, like there probably is a Ukrainian soldier crying at the front. I mean, probably has happened, right? But this isn't what they're trying to say. What they're trying to do is hit the feelings. Because feelings is where trust lives, not facts. And this is kind of the people who are working on changing your mind. Again, look at advertising. They're not telling you facts. They're trying to get at your feelings. And now these, our enemies know this, and that is how they try to influence. And that is also more and more how we interact with information. Like, I was on a stage a couple of years ago with a leader of a major youth party in Norway, youth politics, and he said in a microphone in front of a bunch of people that when it came to news from the Gaza war, he preferred TikTok to Aftenposten, to NRK, to regular media. And what do you get on TikTok? You get the direct kind of contact with what's happening on the ground. You see the thing blow up. You see the people talking about it afterwards who have experienced it. You don't get it filtered through. In Norway, we have a reporter, Jarma Wollesmal. He stands on a balcony in Beirut and tells you what happened. The kids, they choose the direct contact. They choose much more of the feeling-centered information transmission than they do the factual, contextual reporting that is excellent from Yama on the balcony in Beirut. And this has serious implications for how we navigate informationally around the world and what kind of vulnerabilities we have to certain types of stories and certain types of content.
Hanna, from your perspective, how should Norway now work on preventing Russia and other from especially like targeting or kids and young people with disinformation? How can we build a resilient? Because now we have some time, but maybe in very soon it can be too late if we are not building the right structure.
So first, you politicians should be ready for very strong measures like we did in Ukraine in 2016 when we banned Russian social networks ВКонтакте, Одноклассники. I remember the criticism Ukraine received at that time that it's a violation of freedom of speech, this is undemocratic, that Ukraine should leave Russian social networks ВКонтакте, how Russian FSB used it to recruit Ukrainian volunteers, soldiers, to fight against us at that time in Donbass area. And all this Amnesty International, Venice Commission were coming to Kyiv and telling no, Ukrainians, please don't do this because you will become an undemocratic country. So you have to understand in this modern warfare, it's important to protect your national interest first. Don't listen to these international organizations because they are living in DC in nice offices. They don't see how young Ukrainians, teenagers, are being recruited as a future soldiers using social networks. Now, similar debates what to do with Telegram in Ukraine, because a lot of media use Telegram, not media and others. So I think it's really important to put national interest. The adult in the politics should behave like really responsible people without these debates and discussions and others. So this is really important. Also, long-term planning, because this AI TikTokization of the thinking, this is really very dangerous because it's simplification when people are losing the critical thinking. And actually, it's harder and harder to convince when there's rise of populism and all this stuff. So also, you mentioned attack on feelings. Mm-hmm. So in Ukraine, we've seen now, especially, attacks on our spirit. Because we Ukrainians, at the beginning of the full-scale war, we heard many forecasts from CIA and other intelligence agencies that Ukraine is not gonna survive within 1 week, that Kyiv will be under occupation within 3 days and others. It's really important, the spirit of your society, mental health. Because we in Ukraine, we do believe in our victory. And Russian propaganda in European and Western capitals, that some decision makers come and say look, both sides are exhausted, Hanna, look, please stop requesting more weapons. You already lost a lot of brave, passionate Ukrainians. It's a time to sit and negotiate. And it's hard sometimes to explain that it's better to die as a hero than to live under occupation, because the in journalist investigation from Bucha, Mariupol, what's happening in Crimea, how people are being tortured in captivity, or a violation of right of prisoners of war for medical treatment, when 400 prisoners of war were died just because of Russians' refusal to provide medical treatment. So this is really important also to explain this, and also journalism. So in the time of social networks, AI and others, it's not professionalism and facts and how to match with the teenagers' appetite to see just 30 seconds and then they don't care. This is also a big challenge here. And of course, the most important is because we are still trying to convince Europeans that this is not just genocide against Ukrainians. This is the war in Europe. This is war of Europe. And the faster we win together, the cheaper. And it's not just about money. It's about not allowing Russians to attack your next generations by poisoning disinformation, cognitive instruments of warfare. So this is really very dangerous. And if you look at Russian budget, so they increased budget for propaganda. They increased budget, especially targeting Europe. Why? Because if you read Dugin or Karaganov, Dugin clearly stated in article several years ago that restoration of Euro-Asian empire, so this is one of their goal, where Europe has to be part of, has to become in the sphere of Grand Eurasia. So they have a plan, and Ukraine is just preventing Russia to implement their idea that Europe should be in the sphere of influence of Grand Eurasia. So this is really important to explain, because many people, they say like, okay, here is nice weather, luxury lives, people just enjoy and they take for granted security. And this is what really, it's hard to convince people who are now drinking beer, enjoying lives, that look, the war is coming. Because when I'm talking to some serious people and telling like, look, within these 13 years, what are the key lessons? Russia will not stop its geopolitical ambitions unless it's defeated, de-imperialized, and decolonization of Russia happen. No, this is just when I heard this in Crimea and Donetsk. You should forget about Crimea and Donetsk, sign something, and then the war is over. So this is also the biggest mistake here. You should explain that the war, because some people believe in Article 5 of NATO.
Yeah.
Just to follow up, in Norway, even if one of the few countries where Russian, what's his name? RT, yeah, is still not banned. So do you believe that Norway should start to be a little bit tougher on banning media or social media that spread propaganda?
No, as a principle, I don't believe in banning, and I don't think that's the way to go, to just as a principle. But what I think we should do when it comes to social media, I think that we should be stronger and use the laws that we have to make sure that they go by the law. And I think that's one of the main problems with old social media as well, that EU is not using their power to make sure that they do not do disinformation. We are actually planning to go to case against Meta for their fake advertisement because they are misusing people. So no, I don't believe in that, but I believe that we have to build on many different ways to educate the people. I must say, when it comes to, I totally agree with you on some points, of course. I think that we have to see that your war is our war, and it's so much more at stake than somebody is saying. And I just came from Global Outlook, where the Minister of Foreign Affairs had a speech saying that we have to step up and that we have to fight the monsters in a geopolitical way. So and I must say, I work very much with Ukrainian media and journalists, and I am impressed how they develop, how you use the tough situation, and that's what I mean. We, as a free independent media, local and regional, we work mostly with them. They need to get the tools to stand up and to fight and to use their ways to give right information. I think that's a very good way to fight disinformation. We need verification system both in Norway and in Ukraine so we can verify. And I also think that what we need to do is basically as a society we agree to step up and not take easy on this. I don't believe in doing one thing. I believe we have to do a set of things on different sides. And media has to do their job to be resilient and be strong. Politicians should go by the laws and use them. And society, we should train the society to fight disinformation, to understand it. And we need especially to work with the youth to make sure that they can differ right from wrong and disinformation from not information. And I have to say, just to finish, that just today there was a survey about trust. And okay, feelings, but even the youth, they don't trust social media. They don't use social media because it's trust. So that's very important that things do different things to you. And of course we can be very worried about the youth and we have good discussion about that. But for me, I think most youth is quite well educated and are maybe they sometimes need to educate their grandmothers and grandfathers to fight disinformation and propaganda.
Bjørn, how urgent is it now for us to do the right measures? Do we have time, or can we just wait to see a little bit, or is it like we follow the debate very closely?
I think I will always try to be a little bit careful to conclude too clearly in a way, even though I'm not a politician. But I would like to say that one thing just that I think I've been watching Norwegian media and that they've become much better since 2022, if I didn't say so. So that's very important to stress.
Thank you.
But I think there are some weaknesses in the media and how it works in a way. Like, for example, you make a story about like fascists in Ukraine, for example, which is, of course, there are some fascists in Ukraine. And then you maybe have an article where it said, no, it's not really a big problem in Ukraine. But on the other hand, you have a parallel reality which happened on social media, which then Russia, for example, is hammering on this topic in a way over and over and over again. And then I think that also young people, even though maybe they don't really trust social media, they get affected without knowing it in a way. It's hard to think otherwise, I think. Just like just commercials also work. So I think, and typically also like media has this weakness, like if I didn't say it, that they make a story and then it's over in a way. Then they have in a way made a fact, whilst Russia is then hammering over and over and over again, year in and year out on the same topic. And that's a weakness in the way we have. And then, but I'm a little bit disagree that at least in Norway, I can understand in Ukraine, but the situation here is much better. So I think to start to forbid something that, because we are a quite small country, Norwegian is not like the center of the world in a way, so maybe Russia haven't really focused that much on us that they are compared to, for example, Germany or France or other countries. So I think that's not the right way to go in Norway, at least. What's much more important is to build resilience in a way, and how to do that. We have to hammer back to increase the consciousness about, especially then I think younger people, and then you have to do a whole menu of different kind of use different kind of tools, and fact checking is just a minor part of it, I think. Thank you.
And by that, you got the last word in this very good debate. Yeah. Thank you so much for all of you to come, and special thanks to Hanna. Thank you so much for everything you do, and thank you so much for I know it's a hard situation, so thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Героям слава.
ta plass. Dere sitter står hver mot.
Hei.
Dere trenger ikke tro på feedback her. Yeah, maybe like this, for example. Just like in the middle, but still not in the middle. Skal du videre, Jan? Ses i kveld. Ja, hun har vel fått ja, fordi at det er riktig. Jeg har sendt ham videre. Ja, men da skal og i min bil så ja, vi møtes når du vil nesten, særlig onsdag. Nei, jeg er veldig døgn her. Gjør det. Skal ikke bare gjøre det nå etterpå? Skal du få se seg båten? Ja, da kan vi. Tusen takk. Everyone are leaving? Yeah. No one wants to hear about corruption, only about propaganda. Yes. Everyone please find their seats. I should have it closer. So we are starting again, and please find your seat. Jon Ferset and others, can you please find your seat? We will start. Welcome again to those of you who are present. This is once again the next sessions organized by Labor Union Parat, by Norwegian Helsinki Committee, by the Norwegian Ukrainian Friendship Association, and by two think tanks from Ukraine. We have State Watch and we have Contour think tank, both from Kiev, who have traveled a long way to be with us. So we are happy to, for the next almost 20 minutes, the topic is how to combat corruption. And with us we have Dennis Hartvig, who is expert on Russian military procurement from think tank State Watch.
Ukrainian defense procurement, not Russian.
Sorry. Yes, sorry. Ukrainian military procurement, defense procurement. And we have Sigurd Øyvind Kabbestad, who is a lawyer at Parat, as one of the organizers, the labor union. and you will talk a little bit about employee perspectives on corruption as well. But just for a very short intro, there are several Norwegian companies investing in the defense sector and the technology sector in Ukraine. Have, of course, the most famous, Kongsberg, Nammo, and others. But there are also other private investors, and many of them, of course, are interested to know how can we avoid fraud, how can we avoid corruption, how can we find the best partners, and how can we better generally navigate the landscape of industry and law and compliance and corruption in Ukraine. So Ukraine has actually, if you follow like these Transparency International or Index of Public Integrity or some of these international surveys of corruption, you will see that Ukraine has actually climbed many places. It climbed 28 places at the Public Integrity Index, and also improved a lot on Transparency International Index, but there is still things to be done. And with us, Dennis, you have actually, one reason we are here in Norway is that you have prepared a kind of a guideline or a kind of a guidebook for a Norwegian. It's probably, I would say, relevant both for investors and for Norwegian authorities as well. Can you say a little bit about this work, and maybe you can also do a little presentation? I think you have that.
Yeah. We
ready?
We can we share some slides on the screen? So let's start with the next slide, please. So yeah, our team prepared the overall guide for investors in Norway, how to invest in Ukrainian defense industry. This presentation is quite a broad kind of stroke of what we've done. So like I was asked to prepare it for under 5 minutes, so it will be a really kind of helicopter view of everything we've done. And the full document you can see on the QR code that will be shared also on the last slide, so don't worry if you missed that. Can I have please the next slide? So let's start with the broader picture about the Ukrainian defense industry. So it's quite big, to say the least. So right now there are more than 2,500 companies that are registered within the state cluster. For example, like in Norway there are a bit more than 120 as far as I remember. So let's say just a bit bigger than in Norway, and we have more than 5,000 registered products, and it's growing. So the market is vastly it's fastly growing, and it requires a lot of support, and it requires some guidelines for people who are more used to a standard investment procedures rather than the wartime conditions that we are under, because the wartime basically changes the rules of the game. And let's go to the next slide. This is about so the toolkit, the standard toolkit that the investors are used to, for example, the audited financial reports or open data rooms or public registers. These things are kind of limited right now in Ukraine because of the wartime condition. This is not like the goal to kind of conceal some of the information. It's rather the mean to maintain safety and security within kind of state that's under war. Because, for example, you can imagine we have the open registers, and anybody can see the address of the company, and the next day the Russian missile will hit that address. So no one wants that. So the access to information is quite sparse, but still investors should look for people who basically are in Ukraine and visit Ukraine as often as possible, so that can navigate this kind of not so familiar landscape. And the next slide, please. So yeah, most of our respondents from the investor side said that anti-corruption was the highest priority for them. And it's not only about the kind of procedures and the policies within the companies, it's more about the state itself, how the state creates the rules of the game, and how transparent are the procedures within the state, and how independent the state authorities are. So it's really important to support our anti-corruption authorities like NABU, SAPU, so that they can do their job properly and they can basically maintain this integrity in the sector. And the next slide, please. So yeah, as the investors are Norwegian, and they also have to comply with the Norwegian law as well. So this is also the guideline there. So everything that's stated in the penal code regarding the anti-corruption also applies there, even if investors operate in Ukraine. So if you're interested in investing in Ukraine, you should also be familiar with the penal code. And the next slide, please. Let's go to the several tips that we highlighted in the report. So the first company someone introduces you in Ukraine is really the strongest one in this sector. So personal networks are useful. They can be the entry point to this sector, but on their own, they're kind of this narrow, distorted view of the market. So it's really important to get in touch with clusters and to kind of broaden up the overall network of the acquaintances in Ukraine. Next slide, please. So in the sector, the claims about combat deployment or performances are easily made, but they are hard to be verified. So it's really important to get the feedback from the end users, from the military units, and this is why it is important either to be present in Ukraine to speak with the military units, or at least have someone in Ukraine that has access to these people and can provide some reports on that. And the next slide, please. The compliance. So please check whether people that signs off the contract is not the same people that kind of approve the due diligence of the company, because the sales department are not the due deal department. So if it's the case, then it's the red flag, and you should kind of ask yourself whether it's an appropriate thing to invest to. And the last slide, please. So yeah, the Ukrainian defense tech sector is really investable. It requires investment and support, and it can be done cleanly. And but you know, it takes just a different playbook that Western investors are not so used to right now, but we have to basically adapt to the environment that Ukrainian market is in right now. Yeah, that's it for now.
Thank you very much, Dennis. And we will not go too much into detail on the technicalities of the guide book. You basically you've written a guide, right, for investors and for Norwegian companies on how they can navigate in Ukraine and to avoid corruption and other malpractices.
Mm-hmm.
So the QR code can maybe be up there afterwards for those who are interested. You will also meet with some Norwegian investors while you're here. But as you said, Dennis, in Ukraine, not all information is available. For example, because of the war, there's not all information about all the defense companies that Norwegians may wish to invest in. So that means that we are more dependent on the anti-corruption work of Ukraine itself, both the government and the civil society activists and organizations. How would you say Ukraine is combating corruption, especially in the defense sector? And what is most important, the government combating of corruption or the civil society's work and efforts?
So there is this widespread narrative, so like this is the natural progression from the previous session about the Russian propaganda and the Russian narratives. So Russia, I believe, successfully spread the narrative that Ukraine is highly corrupt, and the corruption is the core of the system in Ukraine. But the thing is, well, Ukraine has been a colony of Russian Empire and then USSR for like 300 years. And the corruption as part of the system is basically this Russian Soviet heritage, because the Ukrainian elite, the Ukrainian systems, the Ukrainian institutions were deliberately destroyed, and basically it was kind of substituted by these Russian institutes that kind of has corruption at its core and a driving force. And what's Ukraine been doing for past more than 30 years of its independence is to restore this kind of European legacy and heritage that we were robbed of for the last 300 years. And I would say that for these years we can say that a lot of the progress has been made, in part due to the digitalization of the procedures, because the Institute of Corruption itself is like, this is the informal institute, and it's not that easy to change via some kind of regulation or policy. This is something that lives highly rooted in the society, especially when it was so during 300 years. And the digital products that reduce kind of this interpersonal interactions, they do really help. Because like, for example, even 20 years ago, if you want to get some certificate about the housing, everyone expects you to give a bribery, and this kind of clientelist practices were just standard there. And right now you can just open the app in your phone and you can request the certificate, and it will be sent to you via email like in 2 minutes. And yeah, it's
so there's improvement, right?
It's vast improvement, yeah.
See you, Erwin. You're a lawyer here at Parat.
Yes.
I guess in Norway you don't have to bribe anyone to get a license to build a house or something, but is there a corruption and fraud here as well? And can you tell a bit about maybe the magnitude of that?
Well, yes, I hope we don't have to pay to get the certificates. Of course, I mean, every country in the world will have corruption at some level. When we have less corruption in Norway than in, for example, Ukraine, it's not because we're better people, but we're an old democracy, and we have been fighting, we build organizations to fight corruption for hundreds of years almost. But I've also underlined that we have changed our view on bribery and corruption in foreign countries. Until 1995, companies who had to bribe in foreign countries, they got tax deduction for the bribery. So that says something. It's not that long ago. So we have changed very much the way we look at this as a global problem. we have corruption in Norway, but thanks to very much to the protection of whistleblowers, they are discovered, and the bribers are, or the corruptionists are being punished. We have several big scandals, but they have been exploited by or exposed by whistleblowers.
Yeah, you mentioned whistleblowers, Sigurvin, and whistleblowing is, of course, important tool, right, in also fighting fraud and corruption inside companies. Maybe you can comment both of it, but first you, Sigurvin, what is really whistleblowing, and why is it important for employees and labor unions to kind of safeguard and strengthen that institution?
Yeah. The rules, the regulations of whistleblowing is quite new in Norway. It's from 2006. We got these rules, and the main objective by the rules is not actually to protect the employees, but it's to protect the society from unlawful behavior, and then corruption is one of the main issues, because if you are an employee and you don't dare to tell that your company are dealing with corruption, with bribery, then you will not discover this. The society will not get to know about it that easily.
And Dennis, about whistleblowing, we heard also in the previous session, which was about Russian propaganda. Is there a risk, for example, let's say if I were a Russian agent, if I wanted to stop a Ukrainian weapon project, maybe I could do some fake whistleblowing in the project. I mean, is this something that kind of people have to be aware of, that even kind of anti-corruption work can be in kind of something else in disguise?
Yeah, absolutely. The Russians will use every tool they can in order to undermine our capabilities and like anti-corruption tools as well. This is why it's really important to design the system that is kind of resilient and can filter out all of those nonsense inquiries. But that's really kind of the topic to discuss for an hour, for 2, for 3. But yeah, absolutely, this is something to be mindful of.
So to just round off, I mean, this session, the sub question was, how can Norwegian investors invest in Ukraine and stay clear of corruption? And the question is, can Norwegian investors invest in Ukraine and still stay clear of corruption?
Absolutely can and should. So the thing is, like, from the interviews with the investors, we heard that their initial fears were about the corruption because they were kind of influenced by this Russian narrative that Ukraine is corrupt and stuff like that. But after they visited Ukraine, after they spoke to the companies, after they got in touch with the clusters, with the network, they understood it's not that bad as it was painted. And that's why I think everyone should be more open to kind of explore the possibilities, and to, even if you have some prejudice, to maybe remove them.
Thank you very much, both of you. Any questions from the audience, or should we round off? Yes, okay.
Just wondering, Dennis, will you be in touch with Norwegian business while here? Or
this is the plan. Yeah. We'll try to arrange some meetings to get some talks too.
And also then there is this downloadable guide that you also have. Maybe we could get back to the overview of the program, Vetle. Let's see if we can see. Yeah, I think we say thank you very much. Dennis,
thank you.
See you. Then we are more or less ready for next program. People can grab a coffee. People can grab a little roll if there is are some left behind the wall here.
No, it will increase my anxiety. I think after
just remember that there is streaming also, so be kind of not so far from the. Yeah.
Yeah. This is full of water. No.
Welcome back to those of you who are still here, and also those of you who are still on watching the video broadcast. We are lucky to have a little panel today. We had the last panel was the title was how to combat corruption, and now it's how to combat collaboration. How can sanction helps Norwegian companies to avoid collaboration with Russian military? And we have a 20-minute session. We have Daria Kuzmina from Contour think tank in Kiev. You're an expert on sanction evasion, but also investigation. You're also an expert on Russian military complex, industrial complex, and the use of Western technology. We also have Åge Borchgrevink, Helsingforskomiteen. Welcome. You also worked on sanctions quite a lot. You're a human rights organization. We'll come back to you, but just a very short on the background. Sanctions of Russia started really in 2014, but it really started in 2022, right? With huge sanctions. Then we had kind of basically thousands of goods that you cannot sell to Russia, and some goods that you cannot buy from Russia. Today there are more than 4,000 goods we cannot sell to Russia. And the reason they are there, of course, it's both to reduce Russia's ability to wage the aggressive war, but it's also to punish individuals and to punish companies who are complicit with war crimes or with the war of aggression. So all these sanctions that the EU enact, they are equally binding for Norway. And except in one area, because Norway has actually deviated. They have kind of parted ways with the EU in one particular field, and that is that Norway is not sanctioning Russian ship access to Norwegian ports, and that has some consequences. So we are going to have a little kind of discussion on what Norwegian government and businesses can do, how Norwegian businesses can follow sanctions, whether they do it or not, and what should they be mindful of. And Daria, I start with you because you have done some studies. You have looked also at Norway's trade, Norway's historical and future relations with Russian military industrial complex. First, I mean, how important are sanctions and enforcement for Ukraine, for the war, for the whole picture, so to say?
First of all, thank you for having me today. And I'd like to start by defining the purpose why we impose sanctions, because I think that usually sanctions are misapproached because people think that sanctions can stop war, which is actually impossible. Only Ukrainian armed forces can stop war, and sanctions have another goal. First one is to create economical pressure to decrease money flow, and the second one is to create a technological pressure so Russia couldn't achieve Western technologies. I know that it is usually thought here that Russia is very well developed country and that they have their big own Russian military industrial complex. It is true and false at the same time. I don't want to undermine Russia as enemy because they are intelligent and quite powerful, but at the same time, if we compare Russian and Western technologies, there is a clear difference. And this is our way how we can create extra obstacles for them so they couldn't proceed with war. And if we talk about sanctions in these terms, they are really, really important, and we can even see some results. Here I would also like shortly jump into European sanction architecture, because as you have already mentioned, it started developing since 2022, and since 2022 it was imposed 22 sanction packages, which is really a lot of work has been done. But at the same time, this sanction exists rather on paper, not in the reality. Because without proper enforcement, all this restriction don't have a real power. Every single business in the world is afraid of OFAC. They know what consequences their businesses will face.
The American.
Yes, that's the American sanction body. But the thing is that Europeans don't have the same capacity to investigate sanction evasion. And if I remember correctly, there are currently approximately 40 cases in Norway that are investigated into sanction evasion, but there is no final verdict. And as long as there is no final verdict, and as long as businesses are not afraid that they will lose money, they will lose their businesses, these sanctions are rather artificial than real. And I understand that it takes a lot of time to build this sanction architecture, to build this capacity for enforcement, but this is homework that should be done if we want to create a security architecture where sanction is a tool of deterrence, but not a reactive tool that exists rather on paper.
Åge Borchgrevink from Helsinki Committee, you have worked quite a lot with sanctions also in Norway. So the fact that no verdict have been done against any Norwegian company, is that maybe because no Norwegian companies are violating the sanction, or how is that?
No, I mean, basically Darja just said what I wanted to say. I think that the big issue in Norway and also many other places in Germany, around Europe, is enforcement. And it has been recognized for a very long time, but resources are still kind of lagging behind. So for our part, well, just for me, just to zoom out a little bit. So yes, as you said, I'm with the Helsinki Committee, which is a human rights organization. Why are we at all interested in sanctions? I get that question quite often. And I think that if you consider the whole of human rights apparatus in the world, the whole international system of human rights, of protections, it is kind of falling apart. And the war, Russia's war of aggression is of course a very good example of that. That it's a permanent member of the UN Security Council does something like that is incredibly harmful. And then with the recent United States pulling out of the organizations it itself started many years ago, then you see the scale of the problem. So I think for us and for many other human rights groups, we are kind of reorienting how to still have international tools, and sanctions are becoming one of those central tools that are coming up in these last 10-15 years. This is the sanctions against Russia. Yes, they started in 2014, but already before that there were sanctions against Russia in the form of the global Magnitsky sanctions that were against human rights violators and corrupt practices targeting specific officials from Russia. So we were involved in that campaign, and for a long time we had this interest in sanctions. So coming back to after 2022, when we were seeing what the emerging picture was regarding exports from Norway to Russia, or circumvention from Norway to Russia, we did see that there was quite a lot of it. I think that what I was struck in over these years is that there is a lack of compliance culture in business. And of course enforcement is one big part of that. But how to create this culture, I think that is a question that business should ask itself, and also the labor unions should address. Because there are things that could be done better. And Darja and her colleagues and her new papers are of course one place where you could start, but there are a lot of practices that could be improved in Norway. And I will just end by one concrete example. We filed a complaint against one particular Norwegian company, Kongsberg Automotive. It's kind of a big Norwegian company for supplying a number of machinery for cars and trucks to Russia through Turkish intermediaries and others. And they admitted that they, while they had a lot of compliance regarding the parts coming into the production, that they were looking at all their suppliers and so forth. They had quite good record on that. They did not have anything regarding the buyers. So on that end, they were kind of completely naked. And we thought that this might constitute a very concrete way of proving what is in the law, that this is negligence. This is criminal negligence. Because if you have an awareness that you have the whole thing going for the delivery chains, but nothing for the customers, that kind of, in our view, would constitute kind of negligence in according to Norwegian sanction law. So, but yes, we reported them to the police in February of last year. So we have a 1.5 year celebration for this. This case right now, but there is so far we don't know exactly. The investigations are apparently still ongoing.
So we have touched upon legislation, basically the sanctions. They are also totally liable also for Norway to follow all the EU sanctions, and we have touched upon the governments and authorities' enforcement. But the industry itself, Darja, and if you look from the outside on Norway and Norwegian industry, is there something special that Norwegian, both government and industry, could do specifically? Are there any industries that are specifically vulnerable, or are there any trade with any countries, or what should Norway really look out for now to strengthen the pressure on Russia in this field?
I absolutely agree with Ogi that compliance department within these companies should be as strong as product department, because even though direct supplies from Norway to Russia since 2022 has decreased significantly, there is still a big amount of supply that goes through third countries and intermediaries. And according to our evaluation, including this shadow trade, Russia imported approximately $80–90 million of goods that has Norway origin. And the thing is that such countries as Turkey or United Arab Emirates are now a big hub for sanction evasion. And today it's not enough just to follow sanction lists. You should also trace who are your end users and what are end destination countries. I really love this example with Turkey because we did one investigation at State Watch. It was an investigation into sanction circumvention. Our journalists tried to buy CNC machine that was made in Poland, FAMOT, through Turkish company for Russian military industrial company. She clearly said that this CNC machine will be used for producing weaponry. And only one thing that Turkish businessman answered was that, okay, it's fine, we did it a lot of times, don't worry, but I ask you for one thing, don't mention anywhere that it has military purpose. Like in declaration or in any other document, just don't mention that it has military purpose. Which means that for some people, a sanction circumvention is just business opportunities. And what is interesting for this particular company, that it was established in 1980s, so it is quite old business. It wasn't established specifically for sanction circumvention, and because it's also quite often in Turkey. Why I love this case, because Turkish entity register is publicly available, which means that companies, Western companies, can check who are this company that they supply with their goods, and it takes usually less than 2 minutes. And if you see that owners are Russian, or if you see that this company has been established since 2022, or any other red flags, it means that you should consider whether you can rely on this customer and whether you can send your goods to this customer, because maybe these goods will end up in Russia, will end up in military industrial complex. This is about sanction evasion by and large, like indirect supplies. What industries? We actually have researched this question, and we have a big table in one of our report, industry watch list. You can have copies if you want to watch it by yourself. I would emphasize on rare earth metals, because if we talk about production cycle, everything begins with raw materials. And if we can cut this cycle from ore to missile in the very beginning, it means that they won't be able to produce weaponry. And rare earth is that kind of raw materials that Russia lacks. Russia has big territory, and Russia has a lot of deposits of different kinds of metal, but the thing is that they can't mine rare earth metals because these deposits are far away from civilization, and they need to build towns, they need to build roads, and it is so, this is so expensive that it doesn't make any sense for them. That's why they are dependent on rare earth elements, and that's why they try to import them from other countries. And as Norway start mining rare earth minerals, it could be one of the priorities. You should be really, really careful when you sell this kind of raw materials to third countries and try to check who could be potential end user in this case. And also it's about metalworking machinery, different kind of bearings, spare parts, instruments, engines for vehicles and vessels. And all this stuff should be considered really, really careful. And companies that produce them should have really, really strong compliance department.
So, Åge, when you listen to Daria and all these industries, and you hear about all these high tech also produced in Norway, which Norwegian industries should be mindful of. Have you come across? Do you think that actually Norwegian produced high tech, like dual use goods, things that can be used for military purpose, that they actually end up in Russia? And if they do, how does that take place?
Well, according to Russian customs data, they do, at least, that we know. We might also be able to find specific products, especially if they're of like a larger size. Yes, I think it could be, for sure it's incredibly likely, but I'm pretty sure we could also probably prove it in some cases. And for some of these companies, that should be a concern. I think, of course, they should be, on the side of rule of law and justice, and not participate in this at all. But even if it was only for their own interest, it might. I think that there's also a lack of understanding of how grave this is. I mean, we have colleagues in the United States and other places that are cooperating with groups of Ukrainian victims and are involved in class act suits in the United States, which is a specialty of the American courts. And these are against huge tech companies in the United States. And similar things could happen also in Europe. Of course, we have different jurisdictions, but there are reparations suits, and these things could also follow in Norway and many other places. And of course, there could also be penal responsibility for individuals concerning some of these cases. So again, I think that the kind of seriousness has not really seeped in completely.
Do you mean that Norwegian business leaders could end up in jail? Is that it?
Well, yes, potentially they could. I mean, in Sweden now there is a case against London Oil for assisting in crimes against humanity in Sudan. These crimes don't have any kind of, they will not be foreldet. They're open. There's no time limit for them. So that could also happen. But most of all, I would want Norwegian business to be more alert to what they are doing, and to know that there are better ways of checking who the end customer is, just as Daria was saying.
And Daria, you have we agree there are a lot of sanctions now. Basically, if you look at the high tech, probably most of the things that Russia needs are formally and legally sanctioned. And then you address also the importance of enforcement, of investigations, and stepping up from government side. But are there some things that Norway does, maybe trade or something with Russia that is not sanctioned yet, and that you would wish to see sanctioned?
And here I would like to develop the idea that you already mentioned in your introduction, because Norway is a leader in providing different kind of maritime services. It's ship management, it's also access to Norwegian ports, and unfortunately Russia still has access to some Norwegian ports. And as you know, logistic is also very, very important, not only for supplying Russian military machine, but also for sanction evasion. And as long as they have access to this infrastructure, they will use it. And there are a lot of cases that were documented by different media outlets when goods were misdeclared in declaration it looks like something for civilian usage, but actually it has military usage, and we can't rely on these documents, and usually people think that if we give Russian access to these ports but only for civilian usage, it's fine. No, it's not fine, because Russia use any tools they can access to maintain their war machine.
So, Åge, you have worked also, you have met Norwegian companies who have maybe been in the risk zone of violating sanctions. And we heard from the previous session that Norwegian companies have to be mindful of corruption, they have to check their partners, they have to check their customers. I know they also have to check their partners when it comes to sanctions. Is there no limit to all these things that Norwegian businesses have to do? Is this very resourceful, or is this something that Norwegian businesses actually can do and with feasible resources?
Well, for sure they can do better, I think. But anyway, I guess this is also like a function of how the world is developing. It's not like it's a return to the old Cold War, but there is a growing rift in the world between what you might call imperfect democracies and between oligarchies, and this is a huge battle, which is about our security and our future and our kids and everything. So I think it's better to start now than just to wait 20 years when things will be even more difficult.
So I think with these words, it's 14:40. There are some people may have sessions elsewhere or at 2:45. So I think we thank you very much, Darja and Åge. And Darja, your report will be launched, publicly available as well, right?
Soon. It hasn't been launched now, but we will publish it soon.
So thank you to viewers on the internet, anyone who have followed us by video link. Thank to you who are here in the audience, and thank you of course to Parat, the labor union, who have organized this together with us, Helsinki-Committee, and the Norwegian-Ukrainian Friendship Association, and our friends from Ukraine, who will stay here for another 3 days and have a varied program. You will meet with the Norwegian industry, and you will probably meet also with the labor unions and with the NHO, the Business Association, and many others. So thank you all for coming, and thank you all for, first of all, coming to Ukraine and share your insights with us. Thank you.
Thank you.